Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. And I see there's more people joining as we speak, but we're going to get off to a fast start here to be respectful of your time here. But I want to welcome all of you. We're going to try and keep this presentation to an hour. There'll be plenty of time for your questions towards the end and as we go. But first and foremost, I'll introduce myself. I'm Craig Klein, the Chief Revenue Officer and Chief Strategy Officer of DailyClout. And I'm joined by Warner Mendenhall. Warner, I really appreciate you joining us. We're really happy to have you here for this. If you don't mind, why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background and your experience?
Sure. I came to the law because I served on the Akron City Council as a Democratic city councilman. And I saw issues in government. I saw government, exceeding its bounds. And I felt that there were lawsuits that needed to be brought against my own local government. So I went to law school to get the degree to do that work. And it kind of led to where we are now. I mean, my entire career, I've litigated against local, state, and federal government, just trying to keep government, in its bounds, within its powers, and not exceeding its powers. And, this pandemic, I mean, when it first started off, it was the most excessive overreach by government at every single level, from the federal to the state to the local level. And I just felt like, our little firm here just had to get involved. And we've been fighting it from the shutdowns to the school problems to the firings that have happened, all the mandates. All of this is out of bounds, in my view.
Yeah, so Warner was nice enough to co-host a webinar with us in January where we talked about employer vaccine mandates and people that are losing their jobs and their livelihoods as a result of the vaccine mandates. And so here we are 2 months later, even more evidence has come out that the vaccines are ineffectual, cause harm, et cetera, et cetera. And yet universities are still doubling down on these mandates. So again, thank you, Warner, for being here to help everybody understand what their options are in terms of fighting back against these crazy mandates.
Yeah, here in Ohio, we've actually sued 5 universities, mainly under our state code, mainly under, basically your basic human right to not be forced to take an experimental medical product or engage. Even the masks are experimental, even the testing's experimental. And, we think that people simply have a right to say no. So we have sued, like I said, 5 universities here in Ohio over this issue. And then when I heard about the Stanford University situation, which we'll talk about later, I was appalled that Stanford University was mandating boosters for their kids. Stanford has John Ioannidis and has Jay Bhattacharya out there who are experts in this field and are completely opposed to this, as far as I know. So it's just a stupid decision by the administration in Stanford. It's stupid for the Ohio universities to mandate vaccines and masks and testing, for that matter. So we're trying to establish people's rights and defend people's rights. That's what we're doing.
Maybe you could kind of frame everything, Warner, with just the cases involving universities that you've been involved in so far. Sort of what's the theory of the case and what have been the outcomes?
Well, there's been a range of, most of this stuff is still pending, understand. So we initially won a TRO, and that was to salvage the career of a young doctor because he didn't want to take the shot. We have 3 of the cases are currently pending and 2 are on appeal right now. So it's been a mixed bag. One judge ruled completely for us, and 2 judges have ruled against us. So everything that we're doing is new, and everything we're doing is probably, if we win the universities are going to appeal. If we lose, we're going to appeal. I mean, we've got to get this situation straight, and it's going to take appellate rulings ultimately to do that, unfortunately. So we're in for a long battle. We're in for a long battle.
Is this in the state courts?
We're in both state and federal court.
Oh, okay. So is there a difference between private universities and state-funded universities, state-sponsored universities?
Yes, there is. State universities are going to come under your state code. So the Ohio State Code, I mean, they both come under both technically. So you could sue under federal or state. But in Ohio, we have some very protective stuff. Section 1, Article 1 of the Ohio Constitution allows for medical freedom, the right to say no to treatment. We have a very specific state statute on how you treat students. You're not allowed to discriminate against students based on the shot. So we're using those particular Ohio laws to fight these Ohio universities. Federally, of course, we have a theory that just like the employers, the universities are stepping in the shoes of the federal government and carrying out these quote unquote mandates. And because of that, they come directly under the First Amendment of the Constitution. If somebody wants an exception for religious reasons or reasons of conscience, or just doesn't want to take the shot, they should be allowed to refuse it. So there's federal and state pathways to win these battles, and we're fighting along both pathways right now.
I see some people talking in the chat here about, sort of trying to identify universities that are not mandating vaccines. Are you aware of any that have been, I don't know, what would you call it, lenient?
Oh, no, there are definitely universities around the United States that are not mandating the shot. Okay. I even hate to use the word vaccine, so I'm going to try to use the shot as much as possible because, as you know, they had to change the definition of vaccine in order to get this covered. This is a therapeutic shot with genetic material in it. And I really want to stick to that because we got to change the narrative here. Vaccine puts everybody in, oh, well, we all get vaccines. No, this is very, very different. It's a genetic therapy. It's been proven to be ineffective at this point. And it's also now, it seems like it's doing a lot of harm to a lot of people. We have 1 million injured people at this point, at least in the United States alone. So, and the hot batches that we're starting to see come out, I mean, all of this is appalling information that's coming out about this. And the fraud that has been alleged in that Pfizer lawsuit that came unsealed, that was filed a year ago. And that lawsuit alleges fraud in the investigation stage of this. So, I am appalled by what's happened. Everybody needs to stand up and fight for your freedom. Our U.S. Constitution gives you the right to say no. Our state constitutions give you the right to say no. It's only the government through its contracting provisions and other mechanisms that they're able to even begin to impose these so-called mandates.
The one thing I'll point out right now, since you kind of touched on it, this Pfizer document dump that happened here last week, we have a volunteer effort going on right now to research and go through all of the documents. It's all the documents from their trials. And already in 4 or 5 days that this volunteer effort's been going on, we're uncovering all sorts of crazy, insane data that they didn't want you to know, right? I'll put the link in the chat so everybody, if you want to be part of that effort or just keep an eye on what we're finding, you can go check out that link there. I'm curious though, Warner, you mentioned that this is going to be a long fight. So as a student, if I'm a student or I'm a parent of a student, what are the short and long-term objectives that we can look for sort of personally? It doesn't sound like it's likely that if the university has put their policy in place, we're not going to get them to reverse it in the short term. So what will be the remedy in the long run?
Well, first of all, I want to point out when we sued Miami University, they did back down vis-a-vis the plaintiffs at Miami University. And then the judge dismissed the case because he said it's over. And we're like, no, we want a ruling. We need a ruling to tell us that what they did was illegal. So we're appealing that one. But these students that you have on here right now, all of them have been digging. Diogo, Tice, Ben, they've been digging in the public records. You can dig in, every state probably has a public records request that they can make. And the stuff that they have come up with is astounding. Molly has been digging as a mom for everything she can get. So, I mean, the first thing is to get the information out there. I mean, you're going to hear from these guys in a second, but it's appalling. It's appalling what's going on in the background to force these students to take something that is completely unwarranted. And then, so all the students are digging. The parents themselves got organized. So they got organized to help fund the lawsuits. They've been organized to support their kids. They're spreading the word like you wouldn't believe in every mechanism of social media out there. So I'm proud of everybody for standing up and everything they're doing. But let's start talking to them, and you're going to hear some interesting stories from Ben and Tyson, Diogo, and Molly.
Yeah, sure. So, Warner, I'll let you introduce the guys, the team here, and let's dive into that.
Just real quickly, Ben is at University of Cincinnati and has done a marvelous job with public records request. Tice has done the same thing at OU. These two guys have, because of the issue, have connected and are helping to, they're learning from each other, and they're helping me learn by the information that they're pulling out about the Ohio University system. Diogo's a PhD student at Stanford. There's no need for this booster out there for these kids. And Diogo has been fighting. I know that the Stanford students have organized a petition. Last I heard from Diogo, it had 2,000 signatories out of 14,000 students. And Molly has been a mama warrior out there fighting for the kids, letting me know step by step what's happening on the campus at OU. So we'll hear from all of them. They're great.
So 2,000 signatures at Stanford from students. Is that what do we know? What does it take to force them to take some sort of action or pay some attention to that?
Diego, why don't you go ahead and chime in now if you can, and update us on that signature effort. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Great. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Hello, everybody here. So yeah, that petition was like unique because it gathered. Actually, it's now 2.5K signatures. So it has been increasing slowly because now it has not that much publicity as before. And they even got so the organizer of the petition, grad student, got contacted by local news, and so he gave some interviews. That helped a lot. However, the only reply from the university was just ignoring. So they just ignored. They just acknowledged there was a petition out there. They said they would not change anything, and so yeah, so that they would not be convinced by 2,500 students, which is crazy. Yeah. I mean, I can also talk about other things if you want.
Yeah. What are the consequences to you if you don't get boosted, Diogo?
Yeah, so the university is saying right now that, and I have some emails to prove that. I don't know if maybe Craig wants to share. If you want to share the document called Email Exchange with Vaden, okay?
Sure.
So basically they are requiring to do. So you can start from the end basically. Which says it's like an email exchange. So basically in this there. So that was like the first email where they say, okay, your student, you're not compliant with the booster requirements, and that means I was not boosted and I do not have an exemption also. Stanford is not allowing, at least officially they're not allowing philosophical exemptions. They're only allowing medical or religious exemptions, and they are actually refusing some exemptions. So like it's not enough for you to explain that according to your beliefs you think it's wrong to take the booster or the shot. It's also like they judge that. So they actually judge. They have told some Catholic friends of mine that quoting some prominent people of the Catholic Church saying that they have to take the vaccine because they know what the Catholic Church teaches about the vaccine, which is like, to me, it's like European style government, imposing on religious things. So yeah, basically they are forcing, if you don't get boosted by the beginning of the next quarter, the spring quarter, that starts March 28th. They will not allow you to enroll in classes. And so, for example, in my case, as international student, my visa is automatically canceled. Okay, and that means that my family's visas are also canceled. I have a wife and a 1-year-old, and so that means I have to go back to Portugal. I have to cancel my PhD program just because I don't get the booster. And in the emails that Craig is sharing, they actually make it explicit. Even if you got COVID, so like if you have COVID right now, this is one of the questions that they answer in an email. They say, even if you get COVID right now, you have to get boosted as soon as you recover, which is like very, very unscientific, against all the evidence, against everything. And so I replied to their email, okay, look, all the evidence say that the natural immunity is better than getting the booster. So why don't you just accept the natural immunity, And they actually told me a lie. So they said, where can I say? Okay, yeah. So if you, I think it's, so you see, I said also numerous studies, whatever. So yeah, exactly. So they say, so there was 2 points that I make. One is like natural immunity is better than booster by numerous studies. And also, if you are forcing me to get the vaccine, you should be liable for the negative side effects that I may have, right? So I think it's, I would like to know if they really believe that it's good for the students to get boosted, they should be willing to be liable for any negative consequences. In my opinion, that's what I asked. So would you be liable? And they just said, you can sue whoever you want. And they say, I'm not going to dignify this with an answer, which is like, I'm just a student asking like a normal thing. And they say, I'm not going to, this is a person who is responsible to, answer the questions that students have. And that's how they say, when I pointed out his lie, because he said that the boosters were better than natural immunity, he just said, I applaud your wanting to learn more about the vaccine's efficacy and safety, but at the end of the day, you have a decision to make. So he never acknowledged that he had lied to me. He just continues with the same thing. You just have to get boosted or else you leave. And then I said like, so why did you lie to me? So basically, you just said you applaud the effort. So what did you lie for at the first place? And he didn't reply. He just said, I have nothing else to add. And that's how we are at. That's like my email exchange with them. Now, another thing that is very curious is that the boosters are only required for students, but not for staff or professors. So that's also in my opinion, is very discriminatory. So if the student population is a population that is, less likely to get serious consequences of COVID, right? And they are the only population that is required to have a booster. And that doesn't make any sense, given that we know that the boosters don't affect the transmission, right? So yeah, these are the two main things that are happening. Yeah, I could talk about, there's like so many more things, but I don't want to waste a lot of time. These are the main points that I wanted to stress for now.
I want to point something out, Craig. One of the things that this mandate is going to cause is it actually has a very good potential to cause disability and death. And we know that statistically, we're going to look at least 5 cases of myocarditis from the effort that Stanford is doing. So let's keep in mind the impact of what they're doing is going to cause disability and death on some of their students. So they're willing to sacrifice for this stupid program some of their students, physical, mental, other health. So I mean, it's just, you can tell, I'm probably turning a little bit red in the face. It really, it is just so appalling. So Tyson Ben have been doing the public record stuff, and Molly, let's kick off with Molly Craig if you want. She can give you an overview of how she saw the students being treated, and then let's hear from Tyson Ben. I'm sorry to take over the show.
Molly, do you have a child that's in going to a university?
Yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, I am an alumni of Ohio University. I graduated in 1991, had an amazing experience there. My son is a junior currently and is Tice's housemate. So they were actually very fortunate to have met freshman year, because they basically in 2019 had one semester of college, and then COVID came, and then OU did not go back for their sophomore year, which would have been 2020, on schedule like most other universities in Ohio did. They said it was Ohio University and Miami University, both here in Ohio, because they are remote and they didn't feel like they had the healthcare infrastructure to support students. So they ended up doing a lottery system, and about, I don't know, a couple thousand kids went back. Tice and Jack both went back. It was a complete ghost town. No classes online. Basically, the university was essentially closed. Food services, you got a Tupperware, you could go pick up your food, eat in your dorm. There was nobody there. I mean, it was just unreal. And again, I went there, so I know what it normally is like. So anyway, then the summer came around and the university said, if you get the shot, then you don't have to wear a mask. And then as soon as school started, or right before school started, they said everyone has to wear a mask regardless of their shot status. And then they ended up going full out that everybody had to get the shot. So I got pretty fired up and organized a group of parents, essentially, and got a hold of Warner and kind of got the show going to do the lawsuit. And we have 16 plaintiffs, 15 of which are students and one is an employee. So Warner's doing a great job with that. But, let me just give you an example of what yesterday they said. So OU's on spring break this week. So yesterday they sent out an email from the university that said, their typical, here's the 5 points that they want to get across. And one of them, the first one was, when you come back from spring break, don't forget you have to get tested and, follow the rules essentially on testing. And then the second bullet point was about mental health and how suicide is the second biggest concern amongst university students. And I'm thinking, and you're putting this in the email. I mean, like, it's crazy. So anyway, we are now into our junior year, and my son has had one in-person class since 2019. He will be a senior at the end of April. So he is not jabbed, and that's kind of where we are. Fed up.
Yeah.
And so, Craig, she raised a really important point, and Diogo can address this as well, but the suicide rates are up at these colleges. And it is primarily because of the way the students have been treated. They have been isolated, they have been mistreated, they have been mandated, and it is causing a lot of emotional problems and struggles. That's not just at the universities. We see that at the high schools. I've talked to the high school counselors as well. So suicide is far more dangerous than COVID to these kids. And beyond that, obviously drug abuse and things like that are also related to this severe situation that we've placed our children into. Yeah, Diogo, you have a story about the Stanford students and the suicide rate there, don't you?
Yeah, so this year alone, there has been four, unfortunately, I mean, it's very sad, four students who have killed themselves. This is undergrad and grad, which is, you know, more than the zero deaths of COVID, of course. So nobody has died of COVID, of students, but, you know, all these lockdowns and all of these things, making the students be on campus, but locked down on their homes, that has, you know, unfortunately has a lot of mental health consequences, right? Stanford used to be, when I came here, I was very surprised by the amount of times they were referenced mental health. But as soon as COVID started, they just stopped caring apparently about that. So now, like, everything is valid as soon as it appears that they are fighting COVID, which is, to me, it's so. Actually, there are some parents now that are going to sue Stanford because of you know, their child who killed himself.
Right.
So very recently, it was the goalkeeper of the soccer team. We know there was tension between the university and the student. We don't know what it was. That's not public. The university has refused to say what it was. But so I cannot say that it's because of any mandate or any lockdown. I don't know. I just think it's likely that it is that, but I don't want to say that. But it's just like the fact that university just doesn't even consider that possibility is something that is really surprising and yeah, disappointing.
Just real quick, I want to kind of pull that in. Imagine being a freshman and you're excited to go to college and you don't know these other students and you're trying to fit in. So you're very easily swayed to do whatever it is that they want you to do. And it's just, it's really psychologically damaging to these, especially these younger students that, you know, are leaving home for the first time. And so they don't want to break the rules. They want to fit in. They don't want to go against the grain. So they're going out and they're getting the jab and doing all these things. And then Ohio University has been incredibly forceful on coercion. They have offered free photo sessions and tickets to games, and I think they did a lottery for maybe a free semester of tuition. It's illegal. It's illegal. And you know, even though these guys are adults, they're young. They're very impressionable. And it's a terrible thing.
Yeah. You guys may have seen recently Edward Dowd, who's he's a former Blackstone portfolio manager, kind of a quant or a numbers guy that recently has been studying the reports from insurance companies about mortality rates, because who knows better about mortality rates than insurance companies. And there's been an 84%, he says, Mr. Dowd says that there's been an 84% increase in mortality amongst 18 to 45-year-olds in 1 year, from 2020 to 2021. It's not that suicide is all of that, but it's part of it. And vaccine adverse events is part of it. And, it's just outrageous. And I can't, it's unbelievable that these universities are doubling down at this point.
Yeah.
In spite of all of this audience.
I personally know, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I personally know 6 people in my small world that 2 have passed away from the shot, and 4 others are, they're friends of mine that have been injured. One's had a heart attack. We've got kidney failure going on. All of those people were jabbed around the March, April timeframe. I think we're getting, we're starting to see this stuff, these effects really take place.
Yeah, I think one of the healthiest things to do is fight it, though. And I think Ben and Tice and Diogo are all examples of that. And Ben has been superb in terms of fighting and determining what's been happening behind the scenes and the the power, the way the universities have organized themselves to impose these mandates.
Yeah, if I could actually, that's kind of what I wanted to try to talk about tonight, was kind of like the way that the government, their perspective on this. And I don't know, to try to start explaining that, if you could pull up the PDF I sent you called IUC Draconian, I think this demonstrates it well.
IUC Draconian. Okay, I got it. Bear with
So
me.
now, when I saw in the chat earlier, people were talking about like schools that don't have these mandates, right? And well, in Ohio at least, every public university has a vaccine requirement, and it's not just a coincidence. They actually kind of planned to do it together near the same time so that they wouldn't lose business to a school that offered free choice, and there wouldn't be other consequences of them comparing them to each other. And they actually, quote unquote, colluded this through an organization called the IUC, the Inter-University Council, which is like where all the presidents meet to talk behind the scenes. And this is actually an email from the vice president of the IUC to the legislative affairs person from the Ohio Department of Higher Education. Now, the Department of Higher Education is the legitimate oversight board, but it's kind of scary that these two organizations are working together. But you'll see in this part I highlighted, so HB 244 was a bill that was passed in Ohio that basically said state universities, they can't discriminate between a student who's only received an emergency vaccine and a student who hasn't received a vaccine. And now HB 248 was never passed. It was proposed, and it was essentially going to prevent them from mandating any sort of vaccination, even if it was fully approved. But the funny part here is that the vice president of the IUC, he describes this bill as draconian. Now, this is demonstrative of how these people view their situation. They view a bill that favored the rights of Ohioans over the quote unquote rights of government as draconian, which is just a complete reverse way of looking at the word. Like, the bill was the opposite of draconian. It was trying to protect our rights, but they truly just, they view it this way. And I think that's like an important thing to think about. And there's this other PDF called Combating Personal Choice. And this was like meeting notes from the team at the University of Cincinnati that when they were deciding about these policies. If you scroll down, towards the bottom, right there, I highlighted it. One of their points in the meeting was personal choice and how they need to combat this concept. Now, like, and this is what I mean, it's like they view our freedoms as an inconvenience to their goal, which of course their goal not being to protect as many of us as possible, but merely just to vaccinate as many of us as possible. And then in the PDF concerned staff member, this going back to that HB 244 I was talking about, where there was emails from the school right before Comirnaty received full approval, where they were like, well, we're not going to be able to do anything because of this bill. And then as soon as Comirnaty received approval, everything went out the window. And this is actually, like, I believe that was sent, this email was sent the week that they declared the requirement. And this was a staff member from UC within the chemistry department. And she was trying to tell them, like, hey, Dr. Calhoun, he leads the team, that our COVID response team. And she was like, Dr. Calhoun was saying that Pfizer's received Pfizer and Comirnaty are interchangeable. And she was making the point that, like, the correct point to them, that Pfizer has liability protection, but the Comirnaty doesn't. They're distinct products. They're different. They're manufactured under different standards. And of course, they didn't take these concerns at all. But the point here is that the school is well aware that Pfizer and Comirnaty weren't the same. They were well aware that the approval of Comirnaty didn't change anything under the law, but they just used that wave as an excuse to get around the law. And then going into kind of the coercion, there's the PDF notarized exemption form, and I circled the point that's relevant there.
There we go.
It's down towards the bottom. So like at UC, for our religious exemption form, you had to fill out this form, you had to print it out, and you had to go to your local bank and get a notary to put a notary on it. If you know where to get a notary in the first place, some people paid $25 online. But here, this is Dr. Dustin Calhoun, the guy leading our COVID response team, explaining, well, at first they were going to pay for it. Later they decided we should pay for it. But he was like, is paying $5 for people to get a notary worth the benefit? He's like, I think I could write some essay questions for the religious exemption form, basically, that would, and then he's like, at producing a quote, are you sure you want to put this much effort in, unquote, as the effort of getting a notary? And then he's like, maybe the cost is worth the effect produced. What does he mean when he's talking about the effect produced? He's saying that they were using a notary merely to discourage us from seeking religious exemption. Again, as if this religious exemption, our freedom to our First Amendment freedoms and our right to express those are merely an inconvenience to Dr. Calhoun's goals. And it's just, to me, it's so wrong that he thought that people that are filling out this form, it means nothing to them other than I don't have to get a vaccine. The religion isn't even a part of it. It's just some form to him. And it's just something he was trying to use to basically clear out the externality. It's like in undergrad economics, the vaccines are a classic example of the externality. And all of these policies, the unvaccinated having to wear masks outside, the unvaccinated having to be tested weekly, having to get your religious exemption form notarized, all of these policies were just used. They had no interest in enforcing these policies. They were just trying to scare people into getting vaccinated because they knew that the vaccine did incur a cost on you. So they knew that they had to make the cost of ignoring that greater. And
right.
Lastly, there's the last PDF called Dr. Calhoun Challenges a Student. And this, I think, just kind of finishes that out, where he's talking about an email he got from a student. And this was early on, I believe. She was explaining why she feels she has these sincerely held beliefs that she doesn't want to get the vaccine. And this is Dr. Calhoun actually emailing the person in charge of our equal opportunity office. And he's like, well, he was basically like, what she thinks makes no sense. Like, she obviously has no clue what she's talking about. So can I just deny it on that ground? I'm the doctor here. I know what's best for her. She can't make that decision on her own. And I think this is the general attitude. It's like these people think that they're so smart that they can make the decision that's best for us. And to me, that's always been my biggest problem. And I've said to people before, like, if UC told me or told us that we can't decide to get vaccinated if we want to, I would have just as much of a problem with that. This is a decision that should be left up to everybody on their own. And that's the main thing that these schools have failed to respect. And as far as what people can do, if you go to a public school, request emails from the people in charge of these policies about the policies, because if you want to find deeper documents, this is where they talk about everything that they're doing, and you can find more things through reading the general emails. And it's like Warner was saying at the start about his career, he went into law because he saw corruption in the government. We can't trust our government to regulate itself. It's our responsibility to make sure that they're acting responsible, even though there's no monetary benefit sometimes into doing that work. Nonetheless, it's our money, and we need to make sure it's being used properly. And the government, COVID has shown us that they are not responsible to follow the laws on their own accord.
Ben, what's tell us your story. Are you an undergrad?
Yeah, I'm an undergrad finance student.
And are you still going to class, able to go to class, or are you at risk of being kicked out at this point?
Well, now it's interesting because as the politics have changed, or as they would say, the science has changed, they've kind of been lifting these mandates. And like I said, they almost had no intention of enforcing these policies. They were used as scare tactics to intimidate us into doing their own. They even sent an email out, I think it was late last year or early this year, bragging about their compliance ratings of
right,
near 90% on main campus. Basically, look, we won. But it's well, yeah, but there's thousands of those students that ended up being vaccinated. They weren't going to do that on their own accord. They did that because they were afraid of the illegal authority that you were exercising. And it's this is an interesting part of this battle, because now the politics are really changing. So these policies are going to start going away. But again, it's our responsibility to make sure that we still hold these people accountable, not only because they deserve to be held accountable for what they've done, but because we need to make sure that it will never happen again in the future.
Right. I'm curious, Ben, was that the sort of attitude that you brought to life prior to this happening, or has this seeing this insanity that's happened with the vaccine, has it sort of galvanized you into more of an activist?
It wasn't. I was kind of an activist before this started. I was using public records for other things at the school,
I see.
and then, but not to the extent that I am. It's kind of something I've learned to optimize over time. But definitely, this is an unprecedented abuse of their authority, and I think actually that's why I've always I've always been interested in the angle of like, how are these schools abusing their authority, because rather than just general COVID policy, because there's so much state money that goes into these schools. Like people don't, and people don't even think about the effects that higher education has on the state and the purpose and the reason we fund them with tax dollars, which is to improve our state. And people are very focused on K through 12 for obvious reasons, like it's closer to home. But these schools, they're churning out all the teachers in the state. You know, they're
Right.
creating and all the people that run the businesses in the state and get employed everywhere. Like they can have immense effects on the culture in your state. And it's critical that every Ohioan or every member of any state, even if they have never gone to a state university, they're still paying taxes that subsidize them, and it does
Right.
affect them. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's COVID definitely amplified my frustration. That's for sure.
Sure, certainly. Yeah. Well, let's get Tyson here before we run out of time. Tyson, why don't you give us a little background on your situation?
Yeah, so I'm a junior right now at Ohio University. Like Molly said, her son's my roommate, and we met right before all this stuff happened. So when a lot of people were talking about what they can do to try to end some of these mandates, whatnot. I'll tell you kind of my story and what I did leading up to us filing our lawsuit against Ohio University, because I feel like we exhausted all options before that. And so people can try this stuff too. Just know that we ended up suing them because, like we've talked about, these people are kind of crazy. But so I was elected student senator at Ohio University back-to-back years. And so the first year was that first year of COVID. And Ohio University is very liberal. So I was one of the only people that was speaking out against just the status quo of COVID, of wear a mask and get a vaccine once that became a thing. Everybody's freaking out, right? And I was the only one that kind of tried to bring some sense to things. We touched on the suicide thing. The first time we voted on anything COVID related in the Student Senate, which was a Student Senate bill to support the school's mandates, I was really the only one that spoke out against it. And how I opened is I showed the death rate for people under 30 from COVID, and it was just the number. And then I flipped over the page and it was the death rate for people under 30 from suicide. And the suicide death rate is obviously much, much higher, a much bigger risk to healthy people under 30. And it became a thing where I realized right away we're ignoring that, as we touched on earlier. It used to be a huge thing, you know, mental health is a very important issue and people have pushed it to the side for this. So through the Senate, I kind of tried to do things, really made no progress through that. We made a petition ourselves. We got a little over 500 signatures on that petition. And actually, change.org removed our petition for violating the terms of services. I don't know how we did, but I'm sure there was students from Ohio University that didn't like that we wanted them to have medical choice, and they reported our petition. So then after that, what I did, and this is kind of what I want to give you guys and touch on mainly, I'm going to put a couple pictures in the chat. I don't know, do you have the pictures that I sent in the email too, Craig?
Let me see. No, I don't think I got those. I apologize.
Okay, I'm gonna send them in the chat. But so basically, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know, okay, that one worked. I don't know which one that was, to be honest. Yep, okay, so this one is the one I need to pull up first, the one I'm sending now.
Okay, let me grab that one.
So each state, I encourage you guys, first of all, to look into your state law. So here in Ohio, like we said, we passed that bill that bans universities from mandating emergency use authorized vaccines, which we all know they're obviously doing because Comirnaty and Spikevax aren't available. But federally, it's codified through the FDA guidelines that any emergency use authorized product requires the right to refuse. So that's what I made this little kind of like handout. It has the full PDF to their guidance link there. And this is in the US federal code too. All emergency use authorized products require the right to accept or refuse. And the little footnote adds that the only exception to this rule is the president can waive it in certain circumstances for the military. And that's the only exception. And I don't think the universities are the president, and I don't think I'm the military. So this applies to all emergency use authorized products too. So that one you just had pulled up from the CDC. So this one, this is just the CDC's list of vaccine codes. All the emergency use authorized ones are linked on here. If you go to the page, this is just the part they say this is unavailable. And as you can see, it's both Comirnaty's and the Spikevax. It even goes on to say that they're not orderable, so nobody in America can get them. And they admit that they're not even making them because they're still making available the emergency use authorized doses, which I've seen a lot of people touch on. The reason they want to do that from their side is the liability protection. And so that third one I sent, test and mask emergency use authorized.
Get that over here.
Yeah, so that one's just, you can go to those two websites on the FDA. All tests, all COVID tests are emergency use authorized, so they require the right to refuse. And all mask, respirators, N95s even, they require the right to refuse too. So I know one of the big issues is the vaccine mandates, but the studies are showing, the data showing masks hurt people too. And we all know people that have been psychologically hurt even by the test, or people that haven't been able to go on maybe a vacation or a school trip because they tested positive right before. And maybe it's a false positive test. They don't even have any symptoms and they still get left out of these things. All these things have their harms. And so a great way, I would say, the way to probably start off, something you can do for free, is start emailing people at your schools. Our head person for COVID, I used to email her all the time. I told her, you have realized this mandate's going to be illegal once this bill goes into effect, and she knew it did. And as Ben mentioned, once they got approval, they kind of just used that to make the water really muddy and hope nobody would notice. So I kind of put these things together, so that's like a good place for everybody to start, because that's the federal law, which kind of applies to all of us. But definitely look into your state law. I know Warner can probably touch on this way better than I can, but showing that to people at the schools and universities and saying, here's the law you're breaking, that can have some effect on their attitude. But what we've seen time and time again, and why we've had to file lawsuits, is these people are doubling down. And right now, while they've eased masking on us, we know they're going to bring it back in the fall and probably even over the summer, because BA 2.2 isn't looking good for some areas with high vaccination rates.
One of the other things they're doing.
Warner,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Molly.
I was just going to say real quick, I forgot to talk about this, but one of the things they're doing at Ohio University, and I don't know if they're doing it at Cincinnati or Stanford, I would imagine that they're probably similar in Ohio, is they are testing these students weekly if you don't test, then they send you these terrible text messages and emails and really hound these students. But if they test positive, and we all know the tests don't work, they've already said the tests don't work. And as a matter of fact, I believe there's a lawsuit with Ohio and Texas about the tests being having carcinogens in them. So anyway, they're requiring these students to still test. And if they have a positive test, even if they're perfectly fine, they are putting them in COVID dorms, designated dorms. We've had several students, well, lots of students have had to go there. What they do is they disable their room key, which is like a hotel key, you know, like a swipe card, and their food services. Actually, one of our plaintiffs was stuck in there, and they're supposed to deliver food to those students that are in the, I call them the COVID concentration camps, but they're supposed to be delivering food to these students, and they're in many cases have not been. So just absolutely incredible things going on here. Tice is done, and all of you students, I want to applaud you, Ben and Tice and Sanford, have done a great job. Tice does a lot of articles that you can read on our website that he created. It's called SaveOhioU.com. And a lot of those articles can easily be used as talking points because people are so confused about Comirnaty and these other jabs. And, you know, often if you can't intelligently speak about it, these people will try and confuse you with it. There is not an approved vaccination in this country. And like I said, on that website that Tice created, he does a lot of great articles, and some of them are very easy. So you can go there and look at some of that information. Thank you.
Tice, can you put the URL in the chat there so everybody can check that out?
Yeah, here.
Yeah, I echo your comments there, Molly. Thank you, Diogo and Ben and Tice. You guys are really fighting the good fight, and it really bodes well for our future. We're all very proud of you. Warner, you sent me some documents earlier for sort of some request letters for release of information and so on. Do you want to touch on how people can use those?
What I really want to say to people about both FOIA and public records request in your state is just make the request. Don't be too hung up on the form. Ask for the information you want and get it out there. At the federal level, they have to interpret your request as a FOIA request, whether or not it's done perfectly or not. Okay. So we do have a couple of models that we put up that are very simple, and you're welcome to use those, but don't get too overly concerned about making it right. Just get them in there, get that public records request in there. I mean, I can get into the technicalities of that. I mean, if a public, send them by certified, I guess I would recommend that. So you have a way to tie the date that they received it to your request. So, that's important.
To be specific though, what are we requesting? What are we trying to get them to release?
Well, I'm trying not to be too specific. I'll get some specific, but one of the things is that just like Ben and Tice and Diogo, they know what's important in their campuses and their universities, and they have revealed some incredible things just tonight. I mean, if you look at what they've managed to get out of these universities, it's something else. So,
yeah.
What I want you to request is what you want to request. Be as specific as possible. Get those requests in. Make sure you document that request was made. Let's not get it overly complicated.
I could add something.
Go ahead.
Like in Ohio, we have a Sunshine Manual, and it's like a 150-page document explaining the public record process. And I know I've looked at a few other states. Like you just go to your state's website and look for like public record laws or help, and then also another thing. So read those, and it'll help you understand the process. But most institutions, they have on their website somewhere, they'll have what's called a record schedule, and it basically categorizes the different types of records. And then that can help you. And if you just have that and like an employee of interest or some sort of category or topic of interest, that's specific enough. Like Warner said, you don't have to be an attorney. This is made for citizens to use. They have to interpret it in plain English what you're asking for. And they're supposed to help you refine your request if they can't figure out what you're looking for.
That's right. I see you guys put that in the chat, so that's good. But don't, and some of the parents were talking about, I saw in the chat, and I know there's been so much going on there, it's hard to respond to everything, but what do we do if we can't afford a lawyer? First of all, reach out to a lawyer. Let's see what we can do. I mean, we have a group now, we're over 40 lawyers nationwide that are trying to help everybody they can, every way they can. And, there may be a way to work it out. We have nonprofit groups that are also helping to support these types of, lawsuits. In Ohio, that group, one of them is Ohio Stands Up. Ohio Stands Up has been an excellent supporter of many of the students around the state and individuals. And that's at ohiostandsup.org. So reach out to them. And then if you want to just help out, support groups like ohiostandsup.org and your local, I know there's a Michigan Stands Up and an Alaska Stands Up and a Maine Stands Up. So there's groups around the country that, I think are doing an excellent job trying to support litigation where they can, support individuals. So I guess the main thing that, has been, a mantra of mine since the beginning, you are not alone. We are out here. We are trying to figure out ways to do it. Some of it's on the fly. It's not perfect yet. It's not streamlined, certainly, but you are not alone. There are millions of us who want to get this country back on the right track. And, we know we've got to help each other. We know we've got to band together. I'm doing everything I can. Molly's doing everything she can. I know you students have been organizing among yourselves and everything else. So it's just fantastic to see. And I think, this forms that core group of people that are going to lead our country into, a real reestablishment, essentially, of what we always thought were our core basic constitutional rights that have been just trampled on by, the president, starting with the president. And his executive orders. So we got to get our country turned around. I think we're going to do it. I have so much hope. I'm an old guy. I'm 60 years old. I got a couple of grandbabies. You young guys, I love seeing what you're doing. It's just so important. You are the COVID civic antibodies. So thank you.
Yeah, I really think, I was just going to say real quick, I really think that it's up to us, the people, to make any of these changes collectively. I wanted to do it. I wanted to file something last summer, but it seemed like they were really letting up on things, and school was not in session yet. And then right before that happened is when they went crazy. So, there are a lot of parents that are upset, and you'd be surprised how willing people are to fight. I mean, we're at 3 or 2 years, this week? This has been going on 2 years, just really too long. So courage is contagious. Once you stand up, you cannot sit back down. So if you're thinking about doing something, get with people that are like-minded like you, and you'll be surprised what you can do when you get together with a group of people.
Molly, you said that you have 16 students, families in your legal effort. Is that just to get, kind of a little bit specific for everybody that may be considering things like that? Is this a class action suit or something else that you're doing?
Yeah, we did a class action with Warner, and we have 16 plaintiffs. I could not be a plaintiff because I am not a student, and the students are over 18. So we have 16 or 15 student plaintiffs and 1 employee. Honestly, what happened was, for Ohio University, I was on Facebook, and they have an OU parents page. Most all universities do. And it was really interesting because you have some people that are just absolutely fans of masks and jabs, and and whatever. And then you have a whole other, you know, we're very divided, just very divided. So anyway, somebody created their own parent group of people that were more, you know, kind of on the side of things that we were. And we just all started talking. And I said, you know what, I'm going to file a lawsuit. I can't deal with this anymore. And I actually found Warner. I had called about, I don't know, 8 or 9 attorneys, and finally got a hold of Warner on a Sunday, and we got the group going, and then we started collecting money. And Warner mentioned Ohio Stands Up. They have been a wonderful organization and have donated to us. And so we got these students that have stood up. I think we probably have the most plaintiffs of any of the university suits, but Warner can, and it doesn't matter as long as you have, you know, a plaintiff. But yes, we have 16 total.
So I love what you said earlier about freedom or courage is contagious. Joni in the chat here said that she had 100 Twitter followers, and then all of a sudden, I guess she started tweeting about this issue, sort of calling out for like-minded parents. And now she's got 2,400 people in her group of parents that are outraged by, you know, by these mandates at university. So just goes to show you, for every one of you brave students and parents that stand up, there's hundreds out there that are waiting for someone to stand up, and they're happy to jump on the bandwagon once the bandwagon gets going. Warner, what closing thoughts do you have about what, you know, if I'm a parent or a student that's being affected by this, what's my first step? What should I do?
I think we've kind of gone over it already to an extent. I mean, you just get with like-minded parents, like-minded students, you know, get out there, get loud about it, get the media involved. I mean, you know, I've said this before, you've got to hit this problem with everything you've got. So it's not just lawsuits. We're just one little piece of the answer here. The other part is organization, protest, media coverage, and you know, just digging into information and becoming knowledgeable about what's happening in the background. I mean, we know all these students got all these universities, private or public, got all this federal money, and it's that federal money that's driving the behavior. It's not rational at all. It's just about the federal money, and basically contractually, they've signed contracts that obligate them to follow CDC guidance. You know, that's where a lot of people are confused. They're like, guidance isn't law. And they're exactly right. It's not law unless you contract for that. And they've contracted, you know, to get the hundreds of billions of dollars, really, billions and billions of dollars. But that contract is why they're acting so strange, not rational, non-scientific. You know, they are obligated because of the money. And, you know, I think, you know, we have had some school districts and some, you know, local governments that have contacted us about that issue. And I've got a workaround for them, you know, but they have to be prepared to defend people's rights. And, you know, it is not practicable to violate people's rights. And that's the workaround. You can't just do that just because you got some money from the federal government. So, you know, stay strong, everybody. I am so proud of everybody here that's fighting. You know, we can't do what we want to do unless we've got people to fight for. And boy, oh boy, we've got lots of people to fight for now.
And Warner, just to put a finer point on something you touched on earlier, I had the wrong URL up earlier, so I apologize to everybody. The right URL is healthfreedomcouncil.com. That's what you're seeing on the screen right there. And what Warner's done, and correct me if I misstate this, Warner, but you've got a network of attorneys all over the country. So even if you're not there in Ohio where Warner is, if you're in Texas or California or wherever, reach out to Health Freedom Council and they can put you in touch with somebody that is already working on these types of issues that should be able to help you.
Right. We're organizing lawyers as fast as we can, trying to get them up to speed. Every week we add more lawyers. And we ourselves we have an office in Boston as well. So, you know, you can come and meet with one of our attorneys up there as well.
Well, thanks everybody for your time this evening, and especially thank you, Molly and Ben and Diogo and Tice and Warner. You guys have been great, and thank you for being so brave and standing up and being willing to tell everyone your story, and keep up the good fight. For everybody on the call, you'll get an email tomorrow morning that will have the recording. So you'll get that recording tomorrow morning, and I'll also make sure that it has links to the sample letters, the records release requests and things that Warner put together. So everybody will get that in your email tomorrow morning. All right. Thanks, everybody. Everybody have a
Thank
great
you so
evening, and let's
much.
keep fighting.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
too. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for organizing this. Fantastic.
Yes, thank you guys.
Good
I had
luck,
a great time.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Are we off?